The opening of the book of Esther reads, the first chapter, the first pasuk, Vayehi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh hamoilech mehoidu v'at kush sheva ve'esrim umeya medina. It was in the days of Achashverosh. He is Achashverosh who reigns from Hoidu, from the country of Hoidu, till Kush, whether it's India, till Ethiopia, or other interpretations. Sheva ve'esrim, 127 states, provinces, 127 provinces. Like Sarah, right? The Medrash says, yeah. Says Rashi, Hu Achashverosh, Hu berishoy mitchilosoi v'atsoifoi. He remains in his wickedness, in his rishas, from the beginning of the story till the end of the story. What's bothering Rashi? What's bothering Rashi is the redundancy. You could see from the headline of Rashi, Hu Achashverosh. The pasuk could have and should have said, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, Hamoilech mehoidu v'at kush sheva v'esrim umeya medina. Would have been very clear. And then you continue about the feast that he threw and so forth. Why does the pasuk say, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, Hu Achashverosh hamoilech mehoidu v'at kush? So Rashi comes and gives a special interpretation. The pasuk wants to tell you something about the character. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, you should know Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. You're going to read a story now, and you're going to see that Achashverosh went through a major transformation, supposedly, from an anti-Semite who was ready to execute a genocidal program against the Jewish people. The first time that it came almost to fruition that the entire Jewish nation would be Chalila executed, lahashmid v'lareg v'la'abedes kol ha'yehudim min nar v'atzok taf and nashim. And then he has a change of heart, and suddenly the Jews are his best friends. To the point that Mordechai is Mishnah Lamelech Achashverosh. Mordechai is the prime minister. He's the second in command. He's the viceroy of the entire Persian Empire. No small feat. And the first lady, the queen, everybody knows she's Jewish, Esther, and he's crazy about her. So you might think that Achashverosh went through an internal transformation. So the pasuk says right in the beginning of the Megillah, let me just make it very clear to you. Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. As you would say in Yiddish, the Zelba Achashverosh. What's the expression? The Zelba Yente anders geschleiert. You know that expression? You never heard that? It's an old Russian Yiddish expression. The same Yente, just camouflaged in a different way. That's it. The Zelba Zach. Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. He's the same Achashverosh. And now I'll tell you, I think that is literal pshat in what Rashi is telling us. But here is a question. Anybody who learns Rashi knows one of the fundamental ideas about the way Rashi wrote his commentary was, he writes this in Bereshis a few times, and then throughout the Chumash and Tanach, Ani loy basi ella lipshutei shel mikra. Rashi's job and mission statement and function is to explain as best as possible the literal interpretation of the pasuk, acknowledging that there's so many other layers of pshat and remez and drush and sad and medrash and so forth. And Rashi is sometimes compelled or forced, if I could say, to quote those in order to explain difficulties in the pasuk. But his goal is, whenever possible, pshuta shel mikra, and you see it throughout Rashi. Here, there seems to be a very obvious explanation in the pasuk that doesn't necessitate what would seem somewhat of a far-fetched and stretched out, it's a far stretch of an interpretation. And it's none other than the Even Ezra. Rabbeinu Avram Even Ezra, who was a contemporary, a little older than Rashi. Rashi lived in Germany, in France, and Even Ezra lived in Spain. And Even Ezra says in his Pirush, you can take a look, he says, V'tam hu Achashverosh. The reason it says hu Achashverosh, which is redundant, Einoi k'may Avram hu Avram in Divrei HaYamim. In Divrei HaYamim it says Avram hu Avram, and over there it's clear because it's two different names. So it says Avram, who is the same man like Avram, and the pasuk in Divrei HaYamim goes through to explain the genealogy that comes from Avram. Here it's the same name. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh hu Achashverosh. Thank you. Vayhi b'mei Henry hu Henry. It's the same name. Was willst du? V'yitachin, it's possible. There was an earlier king in Persia whose name was Achashverosh, just like the second Achashverosh. And both of them were Persian kings. This is a second Achashverosh who reigned on different countries, on different provinces that the first Achashverosh didn't. The Even Ezra is telling us something that has been confirmed by many historians. There wasn't one Achashverosh. Achashverosh was actually a generic name for many Persian monarchs. They were called Achashverosh. Just like in Egypt, they were called Parais. There was no one Parai. Every leader was called a Parai. Achashverosh was a very popular name. So the pasuk says, Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh. But that doesn't mean anything because there were a few Achashveroshes. The Even Ezra says at least two. Comes the pasuk and says, Hu Achashverosh. Which one? The one who's Moilech Mahoiduvat Kush Avasrim Medina. If it would have said Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh HaMoilech Mahoiduvat Kush, it would have given the impression that there was only one Achashverosh. The pasuk says Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. And I want you to know there were many Achashveroshes. But Hu Achashverosh, I'm talking about that one, HaMoilech Mahoiduvat Kush. It would be like in modern American history, you would say, President Bush, the Bush that declared Gulf War I in 1991 to exclude the younger President Bush. I guess the third one has excluded himself from the race, so that's not an issue. But Vayhi made President Bush, who President Bush that went to war on Saddam Hussein, fine. There was another Bush. That's how the Even Ezra understands the pasuk, which, when you read the pasuk, it's actually pretty simple, pretty straightforward reading. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh haMoilech Mahoiduvat Kush. Rashi, who always sees it as his raison d'etre to give the literal interpretation, here comes and doesn't acknowledge even that commentary, that insight. He excludes the pasuk from every possible literal interpretation and gives us a medrash, a drush, which is obviously not a simple reading of the pasuk. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. And let me just tell you, by the way, hu Achashverosh, it's the same Achashverosh. You should know after 10 chapters, it's still the same guy, even though I'm saying it in the beginning of the Megillah. That's why Rashi says it. Why does Rashi feel the need to do this? There's a klal in Sefer Yetzirah, notes soifan betchilason and chilason besoifan. The beginning and the end are always connected. We say in the Chadoidi, soif maisa, b'machshava tchila, the last action is always first in thought. In a hadrin, the minig is you finish a masechta, like we say some chastera maskifin, haschala lahashlama, the end and the beginning are connected. Let's go to the last pasuk of the Megillah. The last pasuk of the Megillah ends, of course, on a very positive and high note. The decree has been abolished. Haman and his 10 sons were executed. The people who came to murder Jews were defeated instead in a self-defensive war of the Jews against their Persian enemies who came to kill them, and they killed them instead. Achashverosh has shown unique grace and love to the Jewish people, and the Megillah concludes and says, Ki Mordechai ha-Yehudi Mishnah l'melech Achashverosh v'gadol ha-Yehudim v'ratzu l'reivechav doirish tov li'amai v'doirish shalom l'chol zav. Mordechai, the Jew, is the prime minister, the second to the king. He's great among the Jews. He's beloved, he's accepted by most of his brothers. He seeks the good of his nation, and he speaks with peace to all of his children, to all of his descendants. I guess that's maybe the greatest accomplishment, that you get along with your entire family. That's beyond everything. But kol zari, that your entire mishpacha really likes you, that may be the greatest accomplishment. Okay. Of course, when one reads this pasuk, anyone who's sensitive even a little bit to nuance understands the perplexing nature of this pasuk. V'ratzoi l'roiv echav. You'll say, this Rav is doing great. Most of the community likes him. This guy is a great guy. Most of the people agree. What's most? You say, Doir shalom l'chol zara. Doir tov liyamai. Gadol Yehuda, Mishal HaMelech. Suddenly, when it comes to Ratzoi, he's accepted. It's only Roiv Ech of most of his brothers. So Rashi, of course, is also perturbed by this. So Rashi tells us, L'Roiv Echav v'loi l'chol echav. Mordechai was not accepted by all of his brothers. Why not? Melamed, this teaches us, Shepirshu mimenu mikza Sanhedrin. Some of the Sanhedrin separated from Mordechai. Mordechai was, of course, a member of the Sanhedrin. Just to clarify, for those who are not familiar with the term, the Sanhedrin was the highest authoritative body in the Jewish world, numbering 71 members. Back from the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, ordained in each generation. They were the highest authority in the Jewish world, spiritually and legally. The main judiciary body of the Jewish people, who decided any major halachic disputes and issues. In his generation, the generation that came 70 years after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, and the Jews began trickling back from Babylonia, present-day Iraq, to Eretz Yisrael. And Mordechai is one of the 71 members of the Sanhedrin. Zok Rashi, some of his colleagues, some of his friends separated from him. Why? Because Mordechai became close, intimate with the king, with the government. Obviously, he was the second in command. So hayabatel b'talmudai. Some of his learning was interrupted. Some of his learning was nisbatel. He didn't have the same time or mental space to learn like he did before. And therefore, some of his brothers separated from him. That's why the pasuk says, Ratzui l'roi v'echav. Most of his brothers, but not all of his brothers. Where did Rashi get this from? It's a Gemara. The Gemara says in Megillah, Daf Tezayin Amid Beis, your next source. The Gemara quotes the pasuk, Ki Mordechai Yehudi Mishlam Malach HaChashverosh Gadol Yehudim Ratzui l'roi v'echav. L'roi v'echav v'loi l'chol echav. Melamed shepirshu mimenu mikza Sanhedrin. And Rashi explains why. Those are his addition, his words, l'vishanasa karav l'malchus, v'hayabatel mitalmudei. His learning was not with the same quantity, quality, and intensity. Here, one asks an obvious question. What happened? What happened to Mordechai? Why Daka? Why did Mordechai remain in the world of politics, even though it took him away from his role as one of the greatest Talmidei Chachamim, one of the greatest members of Sanhedrin of the generation, if not the greatest, and Batal Mitalmudei, to the fact that to the point that he interrupted his learning. Now let's understand, there are some people for whom politics is their ultimate achievement in life. It's the greatest thing for them to have a political position. Once they have it, they will seize it and not let it go. So we can understand that. But not so Mordechai. Mordechai was forced in to the whole saga. So earlier he had no choice. His own Esther, whom he raised because she was an orphan, was taken to the king, not by choice, vatiloka. So he kept an eye on Esther. He hung out by the Shar HaMelech. Later there was a terrible decree. Mordechai had to go and save an entire nation from extinction, from genocide. So Mordechai gets involved in the thicket of the situation to the point that he nullifies the decree, of course, through Esther. So we understand why Mordechai is doing what he's doing. It's a question of Hatzalas Nefashis Mamish, of literally the blood of the entire Jewish nation, men, women, and children. But now that everything has turned around, now that Achashverosh became a friend, now that the glory of the Jewish people has been extraordinarily pronounced on the entire empire of Persia, now that they have been vindicated, Mordechai should say bye-bye. He who saw and knows the superficiality, the vanity, the Narishkeiten, the pettiness, the Grubkeit, the lowliness of the type of palace that Achashverosh led. As you could see in the Megillah, you had here a kugelfresser, a party animal, 187 days of feast. Even the greatest party animals don't have a party that goes for 187 days straight. 180 is not enough. He needs another 7 days. With chur, karpas, and chelis, and endless alcohol, and mashka, and wine. And then when he starts choosing queens, I mean, you see what's going on over there. Mordechai was involved in all of this. So when you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice. The moment Mordechai, one of the greatest spiritual, if not the greatest spiritual giants of his generation, has an opportunity to go back to the yeshiva, to go back to the Beis Medrash, to go back to the Sanhedrin, run away. And that's why some of the Sanhedrin are very upset. Mordechai, what happened to you? What do they say? Henry Kissinger, who was the Secretary of State of the U.S. for many years, a Jew, still around, so he once said, it was a very interesting expression. He said, corrupt politicians make the other 10% look bad, right? Very good, very good. Somebody once said the reason there are so few politicians is because it's too much trouble to put makeup on two faces. It's hard enough to put makeup on one face. So Mordechai knew all of this. So why Taka did he remain in the palace? That's the question one wonders when the pasuk says Ratzi l'rei v'echav. Or let's put the question a little differently. Why only Pirshum Emenu Mikza Sanhedrin? Why only did a few of his brothers separate from him? In other words, most of his brothers agreed with him. But why would they agree with him? To be mevatel Talmud Torah, and Talmud Torah on the level of Mordechai HaTzadik just for the sake of a political position. Before it's pikuach nefesh, but now it's not. Go back to the shtender. And the Megillah does not explain this. The Megillah tells us, Ratzi l'rei v'echav. The Megillah wants you to know that some people disagreed with Mordechai. That's why it says Ratzi l'rei v'echav. Rashi is forced to explain what it means. That some were upset because he stopped learning and he became Karev l'malchus. So now the question is, how can the Megillah get away with this? Telling us that Mordechai was rejected by some of his brothers and not explaining to us why he wasn't rejected by most of his brothers and why he didn't follow the lead of a few of his brothers and go back to the Sanhedrin. So Rashi, the great Pashtan, is searching. How can the Megillah make the statement about Mordechai, and it's the end of the whole Megillah? The Gemara says an expression in Brachas, Hakal hoylech achar achitum, right? Everything goes at the end. You end on the big bang. You end with a big bang. And what's the end? Ratzi l'rei v'echav. And explain to me. Explain to me what's happening. I don't want to go away with an impression not understanding Mordechai. Miktzas echav seem right. So Rashi is searching. Where does the Megillah answer this question? So what did Rashi realize? Where did the Megillah answer the question? The Megillah answered the question in the first pasuk. No, it's Seifam B'tchilosan in the first pasuk. The Megillah said, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh hu Achashverosh. Ask Rashi, why does it say hu Achashverosh? Zok Rashi, hu b'rishoy mitchilosei v'atzoifei. Right here in the first pasuk, the Megillah is setting the stage to explain to you the entire story you should know. Achashverosh is going to go through a major transformation. Lest you think for a moment that Achashverosh was really metamorphosized, lo yidubim v'lo yar. It never happened. Achashverosh is the Zelba, Achashverosh, the same human being from beginning to end. And who knew this? Mordechai knew this. And because Mordechai knew this, so even after everything seemed rosy and dandy and beautiful and glorious, Mordechai knew he has no choice. He has to remain in the palace. True, right now Achashverosh is a friend. But it's because of the circumstances. What happens if in a few months, in a few years, Anaya Haman vetzich payav, and a new Haman is going to emerge and offer him a nice sum of money or offer him another incentive? Achashverosh could be metamorphosized again. He knew as Achashverosh, who Achashverosh. Don't get deceived. Don't be enthralled. Don't get carried away on a delusional cloud. that he's your essential lover and he's your best friend. It happens to be, b'chazdei Hashem, the right circumstances, what happened? The Gzeira was nullified. Everything is wonderful and perfect. But Mordechai knew he has to remain on guard continuously. And that's why he has no right to go back to the Sanhedrin the way he would love to, because Achashverosh, who Achashverosh. That's why Rashi would not say like the Even Ezra, because he's looking for the pshat and he's trying to find in the Megillah where you have an explanation for the fact that Ratzui L'Roiv Echav. I think they say an old mice, it's a legend. They say it in the name of the Rambam, some say it in the name of other people, that there was a debate between a great rabbi and the philosophers if you can change the nature of an animal. So they were discussing the nature of a cat. They argued that you can train any animal to be completely, almost completely, to be in many ways like a human being. And they trained this cat to serve as a wonderful butler, to serve as a wonderful butler by a dinner. The cat escorted everybody to their seats, and then the cat brought little cups of wine or schnapps to the table to give everybody, and then the cats carried on their backs little trays of food to bring to the tables, and everybody was absolutely astounded by this great feat, and it seemed like an obvious defeat for the Rambam. As he's standing there, he opens up a box, and a mouse comes out of the box. And the cats, who are all carrying wonderful, wonderful platters on their backs, suddenly observe the mouse. They throw the platters off. They cast the wine off their backs, and they run for the mouse. And he says, a cat remains a cat, remains a cat. And so, the same is true with people. Not all people, but some people. Hu Achashverosh mit chilasei v'atzoifei. Mordechai knew the cat remains a cat. You cannot leave the palace. If so, however, we have now the opposite question. What's the opposite question? Why Persian Empire miktzah Sanhedrin? This seems like a very, very good reason from every point of view to remain a kar of the Malchus, whatever the price is, just like they didn't complain that Mordechai was earlier involved in the Malchus because he had to save the Jewish people. Why Persian Empire? True, most of the Sanhedrin agreed with Mordechai, granted. Most of the Sanhedrin felt he's doing the right thing. But how come some, even a few, Persian Empire? And the Megillah wants us to know it. That's the question. So for this, I'm going to share with you a story. Story I heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I think he was present at the story. So it seemed from his words. The year was Tafresh Pei Ches, 1928. Joseph Stalin became the leader of the Soviet Union 4 years earlier, in 1924. The Bolshevik Revolution happened in 1917. There was a civil war in Russia between the whites and the reds. Finally, in 1921, the communists completely took over. You had Lenin and Trotsky, who was a Jew, Leibele Bronstein, Leon Trotsky, who was the head of the army of the communists. And the communist regime took over the entire country. It was declared as the Soviet Union, USSR, under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, who died in 1924, succeeded by Stalin. Those few decades, the Soviet Union was engulfed literally in hell on earth. Stalin murdered, between historians argue whether it was 20 million people or 50 million people. He killed more people than Hitler killed. We can't even imagine the numbers, what Stalin murdered during his 30 years of reign until his death, Purim, March 1953, 30 years later. The situation of all religion in Russia was doomed, but Jewish religion was absolutely in peril. He set up what was called the Yevsektia, which means a special section of Jews to deal with Jews who are not surrendering to the paradise and ethos of communism. There were millions and millions of Jews in Russia, but it was impossible to practice Yiddishkeit. Everything was closed down. Anybody who could leave, many Rabbanim left, Rosh Yeshivas left, they transplanted yeshivas elsewhere. Very, very few stayed. One of the people who stayed, Mamish from Yechidei Zgula, and I think at the end was the only one who stayed, was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rayatz, the Maharayatz, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneers. He built underground 600 schools. Imagine, in the Soviet Union, he built 600 underground schools. In American democracy, if you build one yeshiva and support it, you're doing well. It built some yeshivas lasted for a few weeks, a few months, a few days. It was an impossible situation. He was arrested, he was sentenced to death, then it was converted with exile, and then he was liberated in 1927. It's an extraordinary period in Jewish history, which is really not very well known. Finally, he saw he can't stay there because they were just looking for another way to arrest him and kill him, and he left Russia in 1928. But most of his Hasidim remained behind in the Soviet Union. Many of them were murdered by Stalin in the 20s, especially in the 30s, the late 30s, and then came the Holocaust, which, introduced a whole other reality. When he came out of Russia, so he went himself with a few members of his family, and he moved to Riga. Riga was in Letland, in Latvia. Later he moved to Poland, but then he was living in Riga. He called an Asifa meeting of activists and Rabbonim to create a committee for the sake of Russian Jewry. Reb Chaim Oizer Gradzensky was the chief rabbi of Vilna, the Chafetz Chaim. They were very, very helpful to him because he felt responsible for Russian Jewry. He was there for many, many years. All the money of the joint came through him. So they were very, very helpful. The Litvish Rabbanim, Chassidish Rabbanim, everybody was very involved. But he made then a big meeting in Riga, and he invited some key rabbis and activists to make this big committee that would be responsible, take responsibility for Russian Jewry, both in terms of fundraising and in terms of planning and strategics and implementation. One of the great Rabbanim of the time, Sar HaTorah, who was invited to the meeting, was the Rogatchover Gaon. Rogatchover Gaon, Rabbeinu Yosef Rosen, was, for many years, he was the Rav of Dvinsk. Dvinsk is a city in Poland, together with the Ur Sameach, Rabbeinu Meir Simcha Koyen. But the First World War, Dvinsk was at the border, so he escaped to Russia, to Leningrad, Petersburg. And he was there a rabbi for many years until he could come back to Dvinsk. So he knew the situation in Russia very, very well because he was there during the Bolshevik Revolution. So the Rogatchover Gaon, who was now in Dvinsk, comes to the meeting. When the Lubavitcher Rebbe told the story, it seemed to me that he was at the meeting because he was repeating the story, although it could be he heard it from his father-in-law. And they asked the Rogatchover Gaon to become part of this vat, to become part of this committee. They wanted him and his stature to be part of the committee for the sake of Russian Jews. The Rogatchover Gaon, Kedarka, immediately says, Setoli na machloikas from Bavli and Yerushalmi, und bebad halacha ke Bavli kenn ich nicht. If I should go into the committee, depends on a machloikas between Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi. Since the halacha is like Bavli, therefore I can't join the committee, which is how he spoke. This is how he lived, this is how he breathed, this is how he spoke. So they asked him, the Rebbe said, they asked the Rogatchover, where is there an argument between Bavli and Yerushalmi if you should join the committee or you shouldn't join the committee? So immediately, this is what he says. This is what the Rogatchover says. And you have to appreciate that this wasn't a prepared shiur by him for weeks. They asked him a question. He saw immediately it's an argument in Bavli and Yerushalmi, and therefore he can't join. What's the argument in Bavli and Yerushalmi? So the Rogatchover said. Everybody knows there's a Mishnah Masechta Brachas and a Gemara in Brachas. Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis, the fifth Perek of Brachas. You have it here. Brachas Lamed Beis Amud Beis. Look inside. Tanu Rabbana. Chsidim Arishonim Ayushoyin Shah Achas. Umispalelin Shah Achas. V'chayzrin V'shoyin Shah Achas. The early Chasidim, the early pious Jews, everybody knows, used to meditate. They would stay 1 hour before davening. They would prepare themselves, enter into a state of mindfulness, meditation, concentration, kavanah, prepare themselves for davening for a full hour. Then they would daven for an hour. And then after davening, they didn't run, another hour, so to speak, to internalize the davening. They did this, of course, 3 times a day, as Rashi says, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. Every davening took 3 hours. That's 9 hours. So 9 hours for Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. That's what the Gemara Brisa says in Brachas. Frag the Gemara, if they spend 9 hours a day in davening, what's the question? How do they preserve their Torah? And how do they make a living? Somebody got to pay the bills, as they say. What happens? 9 hours a day, they're learning, they're davening. who learns, how can they learn, and how can they work? And for the Gemara, Ella, mitoich shechasidim heim, since they were true chasidim, toirosam mishtameres umalachtam mizbarechas. Their Torah was preserved, was guarded, and their work was blessed. A Gemara in Brachas. Says the Rakachaver, in Yerushalmi you have the same question and the same answer, almost. Look in Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi Brachas, Perik Hey, Halacha Aleph. The Bavli follows Dafim. You have Daf Lamed Aleph, Lamed Beis, Lamed Gimel. Yerushalmi doesn't work with Dafim. It works with Prokim, like the Bavli, first Perik, and then with Halachas. Every Perik has many halachas, right? So this is Perik Hey in Brachas, just like in Bavli it's Perik Hey. But here you go with Yerushalmi will always be halacha, never daf. Just you should know. Halacha Aleph says the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi asks on them if they're spending time praying, meditating, connecting to Hashem for 9 hours, which that itself we really need to meditate on what that means. What do you do 9 hours in shul? Some people have a problem 5 minutes. 10 minutes already, they turn into pumpkins. 3 hours, forget about it. That's why we have a kiddush, we have journals, we have magazines, we have everything in order to keep it unto the ram and under control. Okay, but this was Chassidim HaRishayim. But that requires, I don't know, a shir, requires probably a series on how we could learn to daven. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak b'Rebbe Eliezer. So Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rebbe Eliezer, says, Al Yidei Shahayu Chassidim, because they were Chassidim, Haysa Bracha Nitenes b'Teirasan, Ubracha Nitenes b'Malachtan. Blessing was imbued in their Torah, and blessing was imbued in their work. What's the difference between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, you see? Mishtameres umizbareches. When it comes to work, the language is the same in both. The Bavli says, because they were Chassidim, Melachtan mizbareches. Their work was blessed. Yerushalmi says, Bracha nitanes b'melachtan. Identical. When it comes to Torah, here there's a change of language. In the Bavli it says, Torasam mishtameres. In the Yerushalmi it says, Bracha nitanes b'Torasam. So you might say, what's the difference? There's a profound difference. Mishtameres means preserved. Mizbareches means blessed. Take a look in Rashi. Zokt Rashi, Brachas, Torasam mishtameres, betoich libam, she'ein talmudam mishtakeach. Their Torah was preserved, watched, guarded, shmira, in their heart. Their Talmud, their learning was not forgotten. What is Rashi telling us? Usually, you learn, everybody knows, you could learn a Mishnah, you could learn a Blat Gemara, you could look at Siman, you forget. Before you learn 4 times, you don't understand. Even after you learn 4 times, you forget. You forget a day later, a week later. I was reading some years ago, a Jew came to Rav Eliyashiv and said that he has a terrible memory. He forgets everything he learns. He forgets. A week later, it never happened. So he asked him, how many times do you review the Gemara that you learn? So he says, 4 times. He says, that doesn't mean you have a bad memory. If you would review it 60 times, and then you would forget, maybe you have a bad memory. You review it 4 times, it's not a bad memory. You have to chaza and chaza and chaza and chaza and chaza. If not, you forget. In fact, I would say the value of learning the first time is probably pretty small. The only value of learning the first time is that when you learn the second time, it's called the second time, not the first time. That's the value of the first time, that it's a preparation for the second time, with the third time, fourth time, and fifth time. You're davening 9 hours a day, so how much could you review? You could learn a few hours, but how much could you review? So Rashi says that there was a special gift that these Chassidim received. What was the gift? She'ein Torasam ein Talmudam mishtakeach. The Torah was guarded. They learned something. It stayed with them forever, and therefore they could learn. They didn't have to review and review and review, and therefore they had a special gift because they were Chassidim HaRishayim. That's what Rashi tells us. What does the Yerushalmi say? Something else. Bracha netenes b'Teirasan, says the Pnei Moshe. He's the great commentator on the Yerushalmi. Shehitzlichu lahavinu lahaskil miyad v'lo hayu shoyin. They had a special hatzlacha to comprehend the material immediately, and it didn't take time. Usually in learning, till you really get it, till you really understand it, till you really master it, darf man lernen und steigen und horven, nachamal, and go deeper until you get it. Right? The first time you learn, you think you understand it. The second time you see you understand nothing. The third time you understand even less. The fourth time you're completely overwhelmed, and then maybe you start piecing it together and you get it. They had a special bracha. What was the bracha? That they sit down and learning and they grasped it, they fathomed it, they caught it immediately, and therefore they could cover so much more ground. That's why in Bavli the word is Terasa Mishtameres, in Yerushalmi bracha netenes, but Terasa Mishtameres means you have something from before. What I'm doing for you is you put it in my safe. I provide security, I provide shmirah. I'm not going to increase it. You put the money in the safe, it's not going to be increased. What's going to happen is it's going to be guarded. You're going to get back what you put in, you won't forget it. Bracha netenes b'terasa means it's not going to be guarded only. It's going to be blessed. It's going to be mavurach. It's going to blossom. It's going to increase. It's going to grow. Says the Rakatchaver. It's two very different interpretations. According to the Yerushalmi, Chasidim HaRishonim daven 9 hours a day. They have a little time to learn. But that little time that they have, let's say an hour, they can accomplish what another person accomplishes in 12 hours. So I'm good to go. I join your committee. I become one of Chasidim or Rishonim because I'm dedicated to Avodas Hashem in a very profound way. And it's not a problem. I have much less time to learn. But there's such a blessing that I chap what I have to chap, and I master what I have to master, and I grow in what I have to grow much faster than I would have without it. And nothing is lost. But according to the Bavli, that's not what happens. According to the Bavli, if it takes 12 hours to learn something, I'm going to need those 12 hours. What's going to happen is, I won't forget. Terasa Mishtameres. I won't have to review. But if I don't have that time, I will not be able to grow in my Torah. So he says, since Yerushalmi and Bavli, we know, when there's an argument between the two, halacha ka Bavli. So therefore, the halacha is Terasa Mishtameres and not Terasa Mizbareches. So therefore, he said, I cannot join the committee because it's going to take away from me the ability for growth in Torah, which I must have. This is my thing. And therefore, he declined to join the committee. Those were the words from the Rakatchaver. Now let's take this one step further. Why is this an argument between Bavli and Yerushalmi? Because the truth is that the Bavli and the Yerushalmi operate on two different levels of learning. Chazal, as usually, capture it succinctly in their own unique phraseology. There's two statements of Chazal about Talmud Bavli. There's more, but I want to quote two about Talmud Bavli and Yerushalmi. The Medrash Rabbi says in Bereshis Rabbi Parshat Zayin Piska Dalet, you have it, V'zahav ha'oretz ahi toiv melamed shein Torah k'Torah Eretz Yisrael v'lo chachma k'chachmas Eretz Yisrael. The gold of that land is splendid. Zok the Medrash, there's no Torah like the Torah of Eretz Yisrael. What's the difference? The Torah of Eretz Yisrael, the Torah out, the same Torah? No, there's something called Torah's Eretz Yisrael, Chachmas Eretz Yisrael. The Bavli says, Sanhedrin Daf Chavdalad Amud Aleph, quoting the words of Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah HaNavi speaks after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash and when they went to Babylonia. And Yirmiyah says in Eicha b'machshakim ho'shivani Kimeisei oilam Hashem has placed me in darkness. Omer Rabbi Yirmiyah zeh Talmudah shel Bavli. B'machshakim ho'shivani. That's Talmud Bavli. On a humorous level, Reb Meir Shapiro was once in America fundraising, and he was speaking in a shul, a very big shul, but there were some people in the shul who were upset that he was given a platform in that particular shul. So in the middle of his speech, somebody shut off the electricity, and it became pitch dark. Pitch dark. So it was very uncomfortable. So Reb Meir Shapiro on the spot says, Jetzt verstehe ich a Gemara. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Chav Daled, B'machshakim ho'shivani ze Talmud shel Bavli. Is the pshat, am hebt on redden in lernen, werd finster. You start talking about learning in certain places, they make sure that it gets dark. What does the Gemara mean here? B'machshakim ho'shivani ze Talmud shel Bavli. This is the basis of Torah Shabbal Peh. This is called darkness. So the meaning, of course, is, the metaphor that's been given for this is, in many ways, it's the difference between how the Rishonim learned and how the Achronim learned. When you read the tshuva of a Rishon, take the answers of the Rambam. They're very brief, they're very concise. They ask a question in a few lines. He answers it. Va'omar Moshe. Va'omar Moshe. Moshe said, same is true most Rishonim. You look at the Acharonim, and we're talking about the greatest Acharonim, real G'dolei Yisrael, and you have a question, and the tshuva can occupy 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, 4 pages, 5 pages, back and forth with questions and disputations and proofs this way and proofs this way, until finally he gives his verdict according to his opinion. What's the difference? Somebody is in a room, and the room is pitch dark, and you're looking for the door to get out of the room, but you don't see anything. So what do? You have to basically discover your way out through feeling and touching and stumbling and making mistakes until from all of the negatives you figure out the positive. You feel that there's an opening and you go into it and you realize it's a big garbage can, and you realize this is not the way out if I want to get out. Another opening and you're like, and then you see you're going to fall out of a window, right? And then another opening and you're going into some closet, some bathroom, some pot. And then after trial and error, numerous times you fall and you stumble and you fail. So now, finally you deduce there must be one more opening, and hopefully you stumble upon the door and you get out. But what happens if in the middle of the whole process somebody just turns on the switch? And immediately you see this is a table, this is a pot, this is a garbage can, this is a bathroom, this is a window, and this is the door. You see it immediately. When you learn Talmud Bavli, the whole system of Talmud Bavli is, let's start the search. You suggest one thing, that's refuted. You suggest something else, it's refuted. You suggest a proof, it's refuted. This is a door, this is a window, this is a pot, this is not good, etc. And then you will find the door. Yerushalmi is ein Torah k'Torah says Yisrael, the light is on. It was a different style of learning. There was a certain luminescence, a certain brightness. Each one has its own advantages. It's not only a question of time. This takes more time, this takes less time. It's a question of quality. It has to do with what we discussed last week. Parshas Kisisa, the difference of Luchas Rishonos and Luchas Acharonos. You could see the tree in the context of the forest. You see the whole picture, you immediately put it in context. And sometimes you're only dealing with one item and you have to figure that out. It's a whole different type of learning. It's a different type of process. And it's a different type of conclusion. This is the difference between Torah Eretz Yisrael and Torah's Bavli. The Gemara famously says in Brachas, Ein uchlasa bebavel. The Gemara says, Ein tainis tzibur bebavel. The concept of tzibur, the concept of absolute cohesiveness exists only in Eretz Yisrael. It's true also in Torah. In Eretz Yisrael, the Torah is seen as a tzibur, as one collective whole. The light is on, and you see the full picture, and therefore you can go directly to it. In Bavel, it's a different style, it's a whole different paradigm, it's a different experience. If that's the case, come now back to our discussion. In Talmud Yerushalmi it says, the Chasidim HaRishonim had an hour to learn. Bracha nitenes b'teirasan. They grasped the material immediately. What it would take another person so much more time, they had a special bracha that this little Torah grows and blossoms and they have all the success they would have had if they'd spent day and night learning. Bavli, that's not the system of Bavli. What Bavli says is they were Chasidim HaRishonim that had a special gift to contain the material, mishtameres, to hold on to the material, to preserve the material, but not the bracha to grow and blossom. You have a little time, You learn what you could learn then, you grow as much as then, but the rest is preserved. That's why the Bavli says mishtameres, the Yerushalmi says mizbarachas. If that's the case, let's now go back to Mordechai and his colleagues. Where did the Sanhedrin come from? The primary location of the Sanhedrin was in Eretz Yisrael. Different cities, and then the Sanhedrin Gdoila, which was situated, of course, in Yerushalmi, when there was a Beis HaMikdash, by the Lishkas HaGazos, right there on the mountain up in Rabbi, as part of the Beis HaMikdash, had the Sanhedrin. However, this was not at a time when most Jews were not in Eretz Yisrael. Mordechai was exiled. We have this a pasuk in Megillah. Says the pasuk in Megillah Perik Beis, when Mordechai is introduced the first time. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan abir, u'shmai Mordechai ben Yori ben Shimi ben Kish ish Yemini. So you have a man in Shushan, his name is Mordechai. Asher hadlo miYerushalayim im hagoyla, Asher haglasayim Yechanya melech Yehuda, Asher hegla Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel. Mordechai was exiled from Yerushalmi. With the exile that Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian emperor, exiled Yechanya, the king of Yehuda, and he exiled Mordechai, the Pasuk in Malachim, he exiled Hacharash v'Hamasger, that the Gemara says in Gittin. You'll soon learn it with the greatest Talmidei Chachamim of the generation, Hacharash v'Hamasger, and he exiled them to Yerushalayim, and this was before the Churban. This was more than a decade before Churban Bayis Rishon. The king was Yechanya. He was a son of Yehoyakim, who revolted against Nebuchadnezzar, and he appointed his son Yechanya, but he was a king only for 3 months. Nebuchadnezzar exiles him with most of the spiritual leaders of the generation to Bavel before the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. Later, a new king comes up after Yechanya, his uncle, his name was Tzidkiyahu. He reigns, and then he revolts against Nebuchadnezzar. That's when Nebuchadnezzar comes in a second time, destroys the Beis HaMikdash, massacres the Jews, exiles the living ones, the remnants, to Babylonia. But they were welcomed in Babylonia already by a group of the greatest Talmidei Chachamim who were there more than a decade earlier, together with Mordechai and the Sanhedrin, the Charish Ramazga. And that's why, by the way, Babylonian Jewry was so successful and prosperous in terms of spirituality, in terms of Torah, because the people who laid the foundations for the Babylonian community were people in the stature of Mordechai, who came in the first exile before the second exile. So where did Mordechai come from? Asher hagla miYerushalayim, even though he was in Bavli. But over the years, this is 70 years after the destruction, the time of Purim already. You can have different members of the Sanhedrin. We'll have in later generations, the Gemara discusses in Pesachim, Hillel HaBavli, Hillel who comes from Bavel, Ari Olami Bavel, Reb Nosson HaBavli, also in Gittin Rashi says he came from Bavel. You had some Sanhedrin who came from Bavel. If so, we now understand the argument. Mordechai was an Eretz Yisrael Yid. Mordechai was a Talmud Yerushalmi Yid. Not everybody were Talmud Yerushalmi Yidden. There were a minority at that time who were Talmud Bavli Jews. So now came the question. Mordechai goes into the palace. Why? Achashverosh hu Achashverosh. He feels that it's obviously, I have to clarify, we're not dealing here with a question of mamish vaday pikuach nefesh, that the Jewish people are in danger, then there would be no argument. We're not even dealing with a question of safek pikuach nefesh, which is also doiche kol Torah kula. We're dealing with a question that maybe there's going to be some new Haman that will emerge and transform Achashverosh. So Mordechai goes into politics and he stays in politics. Most of the Sanhedrin agree with him. Some don't. Why? Here is the answer. Mordechai was the shita of Talmud Yerushalmi. Bracha nitenes b'terasa. So therefore he could stay all day in the palace, be entrenched in a vicious political world which is not very idealistic and not very pure. It's petty, it's narcissistic, it's self-centered, it's full of flattery. Like the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Hevei Zehirim b'Rishus. Be careful with government. They'll appear to be your friends during the election season, but read my lips, but once you elect them, the game is over. So Mordechai says, bracha nitenes b'terasa. And if bracha nitenes b'terasa, so the few hours he has at night to sit and learn, there's going to be such a blessing in it. He'll be able to compensate for all the hours he didn't spend learning with his chaverim, with his friends. Most of the Sanhedrin who come from Eretz Yisrael agree with him. But Pirsha B'meno Miktzah Sanhedrin, there were those who had a different shita, the shita of Talmud Bavli. Toirasan mishtameres, not toirasan mizbareches. And therefore, from their perspective, it's not worth it. How could you give away the eternal, real world of Talmud Torah for the transient, petty, superficial, fake world of politics? It's unfair. Maybe you'll have a blessing to remember what you learned, but to be able to grow in your Torah, to be able to master your Torah, to be able to bless your Torah, it's impossible. Which the truth is, when we look into the Gemara in Masechta Megillah, and you see the structure of the sugya, we could sense this approach subtly. Take a look in the Gemara, it's the sources closer to the beginning. The Gemara says, Ki Mordechai Yehudi Mishnah Lamelech, Melamed Shepirshu Memeno Miktzah Sanhedrin. Some of the Sanhedrin separated from him. Now look at the Gemara weiter. Omer Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef said, G'doyla Hatzalas, Godel Talmud Torah Yosef Hatzalas Nefashos. The learning of Torah is greater than saving souls. The meikare chashiv leila Mordechai basar dalad, ula besoiv basar chamisha. In Tanach, first Mordechai is counted after 4, and then he comes after 5. He becomes number 6. Meikare, in the Sefer of Ezra Peirik Beis, the pasuk says that there were Jews who came from Babylonia back to the Holy Land. Asher boim Zerubbabel, they come back with Zerubbabel. Yeshua, Nehemiah, Sarya, Ra'alia, and Mordechai Bilshan. Mordechai is number 5. And then you have a later Sefer Nehemiah, Peirik Zayin, Habayim im Zerubbabel. Again, here you have a list. Yeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Ra'amya, Nachmani. Mordechai Bilshan is number 6. He was pushed down in the list from number 5 to number 6. Says Rabbi Yosef, you know why? So Rashi explains, because Pirshum Imenu, Miktzah Sanhedrin separated from him. Between the first count and the second count, he left the full-time occupation with Torah and he went into politics to serve in the Persian Empire, and therefore the Tanach sends him to number 6. So the Mefarshim ask a very simple question. Why does Rabbi Yosef have to search for a proof from Ezra and Nehemiah contrasting 2 psukim in an order? He has it in the Megillah. The Megillah says, Ratzui l'roi vecha v'loi l'cholech. The Gemara just said, Melamed shepirshim and mitzvah Sanhedrin. Why does the Gemara have to search far away? Or you could put the question differently. If this is the case that G'dayla Talmud Torah Matzalas Nefashos, and Mordechai was pushed down the list from number 5 to number 6 by the Tanach, so Mordechai should have done one of 2 things. Either he should have convinced them that they were wrong and he was right, or he should have repented and left and gone into Torah, which is greater than Atzalas Nefashos, and then he would be upgraded on the list and he would be Ratzi L'Cholech of what's happening. The answer, of course, is the Ben Yehoyada, the Ben Ish Chai, writes in his commentary on Gemara. He says the Gemara can't bring a proof from a sechta, from the pasuk in Megillah Ratzi L'Roi Vechav. You know why? It's a Raya Lister. That would prove the opposite. You're telling me G'dayla Talmud Torah Matzalas Nefashos because Mordechai was downgraded on the list. You're going to bring me the pasuk Ratzi L'Roi Vechav V'loi L'Kol Echav. What are you going to say? Roi Vechav agreed. Roi Vechav agreed. A few brothers didn't agree. So it's actually going to undermine. It's going to undermine. So the Gemara can't use that pasuk. That pasuk teaches you Mordechai was right. He wasn't wrong. So the Gemara has to find the contrast between Ezra and Nehemiah. If so, the Ben Yehoyada is correct, but if so, we have a major problem. The Gemara is bringing 2 statements, and they're contradicting each other. First, the Gemara says, Melamed shepirshim emenu miktzah Sanhedrin v'loi kol Sanhedrin, which means v'loi kol Sanhedrin, which indicates, of course, that Mordechai was in the right. He wasn't in the wrong. And then the Gemara says, no, by the way, he was downgraded. And in Ein Yaakov, they were both said by the same person, Amar Rabbi Yosef. If you look in the Girsa of Ein Yaakov and Gemara, it's the same man saying 2 statements which seem to contradict each other. So what is happening here? What is the meaning of this? And what happened with Achirei Rabbim Lahatos? There's a klal, there's a debate in Sanhedrin, you go according to the majority. There's a debate here. Mordechai is right, Mordechai is wrong. Achirei Rabbim Lahatos, the majority says he's right. What do you mean you separate from him? What is this, a breakaway minion? So you don't agree, fine, take it for a vote. Find out what Mordechai... So you could say it wasn't a psak din, it was just their own feeling. So what they went around sharing their feelings that Mordechai is wrong when the majority of the Sanhedrin, who are the Chachmei Ador, say Mordechai is right. What's pshat? Of course, the meaning here is, you have to always read the words of the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't say Cholku al Mordechai. The Gemara doesn't say they argued with Mordechai. The Gemara doesn't even say, as we have a common expression in Shas, Ein Ruach Miktzas Chachamim Noiche Himenu. Some of the Chachamim, their spirit was not pleased with what Mordechai did. That's not the expression. The expression is not that they argued and not that they were displeased with him. The expression is Pirshu Mimeno Miktzah Sanhedrin. They separated. What does it mean they separated? They appreciated the fact that Mordechai is doing what he's doing from his perspective. They felt that for them, from their vantage point, from their perspective, this was not a path. They had a different mahalach. Pirshu Mimenu, they had their own derech. It's not that they felt Mordechai was in the wrong. Mordechai violated. Mordechai Chalila was tarnished by politics. He smelled the odor of power. You're not dealing with a Trump situation. Lahavdil. He smelled the smell of power and he's like, I'm not leaving this. No. Persian Empire, Sanhedrin. They separated in the sense that they felt there's a different perspective. And that's why the Gemara says Persian Empire, Sanhedrin. And Loikol, not all of the Sanhedrin. And that's why Mordechai didn't change. Why? Mordechai had a derech and they understood it. It was the derech of Talmud Yerushalmi, not Talmud Bavli. They were Talmud Bavli and therefore they could not entertain this mahalach, but they could understand that Mordechai does entertain this mahalach. That's why there's no Achirei Rabbim Lahatas. They weren't arguing. They weren't saying he was wrong. From their perspective, Pirshu Emenu Miktzah Sanhedrin, they have a different derech. On this, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef says, I just want to clarify one thing. Even if Mordechai was right, you should just know that G'doyle Talmud Torah Yosem Hatzalas Nefashos. There's something special. There's something unique about somebody who dedicates his entire life, day and night, to learning Torah. Even somebody who's involved in saving souls. But there's something special, and the Tanach acknowledges it. They don't delete Mordechai's name. But Mordechai's name is downgraded in the Sanhedrin, in the group of the Sanhedrin. Why? Because he's not learning a Talmud Torah. So come to Mordechai and say, be upgraded. Mordechai says, Ich weiß, dass fällt etwas. But Hatzalas Nefashos trumps it. Gedoyle Talmud Torah Hatzalas Nefashos doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't do Hatzalas Nefashos. It means you should just know. Sometimes you're compromising your own spiritual perfection to save a soul. Am I downgraded? Of course I'm downgraded. For hours I have to deal with Achashverosh. For hours I have to deal with his Sarisim, with all of the people in the palace. Of course, there's a challenge. It's you getting your hands dirty. You're involved in things on your own you would not want to be involved. This is the greatness of Talmud Torah that even Hatzalas Nefashos doesn't have. You're in the world of God 24 hours a day. Here you have to reveal Hashem in a place where he's not revealed. So something is missing, something is missing. But Mordechai won't change and most of the Sanhedrin won't change. Torahson is bareches. There's an issue of Hatzalas Nefashos. Mordechai remains in his path, in his derech, and therefore he stays in the palace. Now at last, we come to the Rashi in the beginning of the Megillah. It comes together. Why does Rashi exclude, take out the pasuk from Pshat, not like the Even Ezra? Because this explains beautifully why Mordechai feels compelled to remain in the Sanhedrin, because Achashverosh hu Achashverosh. Some of his brothers disagree with him because they're in the Shitta of Talmud Bavli, Terasan Mishtameres. He is from Talmud Yerushalmi, Hagoyla, Asher Haglasam Yerushalayim, is Brachin Etenes B'Terasan. And now if there wouldn't be an issue with Achashverosh, beautiful, Brachin, why should I be there? Talmud Torah is greater than everything. There's an issue with Achashverosh that's called Hatzalas Nefashos. Even though it's not that there's blood right now, there's a danger right now, but we're dealing with an issue that can end up with a dilemma connected to Hatzalas Nefashos, and therefore Mordechai remains in the palace of Achashverosh as Mishnah L'Melech Achashverosh. What do we now learn from this Rashi? Going over from the world of Pshat, Pshat or Drash interpreting, and seeing a profound lesson in this Rashi. What is Rashi telling us? Here you have a king who on the surface has transformed himself. And yet, the Megillah tells us, look a little deeper, and you'll see, Hu Achashverosh, Hu Berisha Mitchilosei Vatzayfei. If this is true in the negative, how much more so, as the Gemara always says, Meruba Midah Toiva. How much more so in the positive? Sometimes a person looks at himself or a person looks at herself in the mirror and they feel that for a number of years they wandered, they made serious mistakes, they did things that may have undermined their moral life, their spiritual life, their familial life, their godly life, their soul, their neshama. And as a result of that, they can enter into a depression or a sense of failure and terrible self-guilt and endless remorse of blaming themselves for being such a bad person. Comes Rashi and tells us, Hu Achashverosh, Hu Berisha Mitchilosei Vatzayfei. If it's in the negative, you look at Achashverosh, and he was transformed in such a powerful way, and you say, don't get affected by the superficial splendor. Remember, in the middle he had a good moment, he was in a good mood, so we're all lucky. But don't count on it. It's also true even more in the positive. And that is, a person has to know, the beginning, you're good, you were holy. In the middle, maybe a few years, you made mistakes. And you got lost. You have to be able to appreciate your essence, your true purity, your true identity. Even if in the middle of your life, you took a turn here, you took a turn there. You were born in purity, you're essentially pure. Your soul is a chelik elikamimal, it's a part of Hashem. Even if I made various mistakes, look at the pnimius of yourself, look at the pnimius of your children, look at the pnimius of another Jew, and you'll realize that despite the externalities which are important and have to be fixed, don't let that redefine your entire essence. Sometimes it goes even more than that. A person is born, some of us sitting in this room, or if you're watching, people were born into families, and they felt that their original life, they were born into families that were completely alienated from Judaism, completely alienated from Torah, completely alienated from mitzvahs. Years later, perhaps they discover it, and they return, and they look at their lives, and they say, so many years, it seems, were wasted or alienated. Says Rashi, Achashverosh hu Achashverosh mitchilosei vatzoife. You have to remember, your history didn't begin the day you were born. Our history began thousands of years ago. Every Jew living today, whoever they are, they go back 4 or 5 generations, and usually less, but at most 4 or 5, maybe 6 generations. They had grandmothers and grandfathers who were fully involved in Torah and mitzvahs, all the way back to Ma'amad Har Sinai. So even for a few decades, or a century or 2 centuries, there was some confusion. A person should not identify themselves based on the external confusion that happened a few years. They should remember that hu Achashverosh in the negative, and Ayid is Ayid in the positive. From the beginning of time till the end of time, there's one golden chain of commitment to truth, of advekus, of intimacy with Hashem. And even if in the middle, there's different days, people go through different journeys. That's the system. People go through journeys, and sometimes they create paths. But it doesn't take away from the fact that their pnimius, their essence, always remains pure, pristine, and that's what they have to see. The Koshnitzer Maggid once said something very powerful. He said that the Gemara says in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, Eila moya de Hashem mikroi kodesh asher tikru oisam b'moyadam. So the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah daf Chafei Amud Aleph that it says 3 times by the Yamim Tovim the word oisam. There are no nekudas in a Sefer Torah, so you can read it atem. So he says asher tikru oisam. You could read it asher tikru atem. Atem afilu shoygegin. Atem afilu mezidin. Atem afilu anusin. Atem afilu motoyin. A few versions. Even if Bezdin makes a mistake, they make a wrong calculation, they're fooled by witnesses, whatever happens, and they say this is the new day of the month, and nobody saw the moon didn't appear last night, it's still Rosh Chodesh. The whole story there between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, when Yom Kippur was, Rabbi Gamliel had his own Yom Kippur, Rabbi Yeshua argued Rabbi Yeshua was a greater astronomer than Rabbi Gamliel. And he seemed to be right astronomically, and Rabbi Akiva calmed him down and said, Rabbi Gamliel is Bezdin, and when Bezdin says this is the date, even if it's Mezidin doesn't mean they're Rishayim. If a Bezdin is a Rasha, they're always Bezdin. Bezdin doesn't mean they're corrupt and they're still Bezdin. That's not a Bezdin anymore. It's always Bezdin. It means Mezidin, they do it especially because they think it's the right thing to do it. For whatever reason, there's different calculations, but they're making a mistake. It's Rosh Chodesh. So Rabbi Yeshua calmed down and he accepted it, and he walked on Yom Kippur, he carried on Yom Kippur, according to his Yom Kippur, because according to Rabbi Gamliel, it wasn't Yom Kippur. That's what the Gemara says. So the Koshnitzer Maggid says, if the Gemara says this when it says Oisam, and the Gemara says, don't read it Oisam, read it Atem. And Atem 3 times means under all circumstances. Atem, you. You, even if you're making a mistake. You, even if you're amazed if you do it willingly. He says, imagine where it says in the Torah, actually, atem, not oisam. It says in Parshas Re'eh, bonim, atem l'Hashem Elokechem. So what's atem? He says, atem afilu shoygigin, atem afilu mezidin, atem afilu anusin, atem afilu mutayin. When it says, bonim atem, you are children of Hashem. So it means you're always a child. Even if you made mistakes, and even if willingly you rebelled and you violated and you went against, the child remains a child. Even if the child willingly rebelled because the child didn't rebel. It's the external aspect of the child who feels that he or she is compelled to do this and this for whatever reason. We're not getting into all of the psychological, emotional, social trauma reasons that people do what they do. Doesn't change the fact that you're a child. So when it comes to negativity, you say, don't get affected by Achashverosh's smile. The fact that he's taking photo ops with Mordechai on the front page, Mordechai and Achashverosh are buddies. Don't turn him into your best friend because next year he could be your greatest enemy and kill you. It happened in Spain. It happened in Germany. This is the story of Jewish history. It comes to the positive. Even if you go through different processes, don't doubt your essential purity, your essential holiness, your essential connection. The fact that you are a child. I want to conclude with a Maisa. The Baba V'Rav, Reb Shlomo Halberstam, who passed away Rosh Chodesh Av, I think, Tovshin Samach, right? 2000? Yeah? Okay. So, but there was a Maisa that he was a son of the Kedusha Sion, Rabbi Sion, who was murdered in the Holocaust, and he survived, and became afterwards the Baba V'Rav till his passing in the summer of 2000. The early years, he came to America in the 1940s, and Babiv, like so many other Hasidic dynasties, was virtually almost completely wiped out. But he rebuilt a great community, a great empire. And I think he was in Manhattan in the beginning, right? So the Babiv, huh? Where was he? In the West Side, right? So he didn't have a minyan Friday night. So he asked his son, Reb Naftolshe, to go out and find a Jew for a minyan. So he went out with somebody else, and there was a Jew walking there on the sidewalk, He looked like a Jew. And he asked him if he would join them for a minyan. They need a tent. He said, yeah. He comes in. He looked like a secular Jew. They gave him a yarmulke. And he said, by the way, ich bin a bal tefillah euch. I could daven for the Amid euch. Gesundheit. So he went to the Amid, and he did a beautiful tefillah. And he tells the Baba V'Rav, he says, before the war in my city, I was a bal tefillah. I was a chazan. Fine. So he said, so why don't you come? Why don't you come every Shabbos? You'll be our bar tefillah. We'll have a minyan. You'll be a bal tefillah. You'll get your stender back. And he started to come. And it was wonderful. He was a beautiful bal tefillah. And the Bavli was bringing him into shul. And he was very happy. And then one day he disappeared. He stopped coming. After a few weeks, the Baba V'Rav, Shabbos morning, asks his son, he says, where is this Jew? So he says, I don't know. He just stopped coming. He probably lost interest. He got bored of the stender. So he says, go outside, walk around. Maybe he's somewhere in the neighborhood. Invite him. Tell him that we miss him. I want him back. He should come for a visit. Fine. So he takes somebody from the shul before Shabbos morning, and he goes out to look for him. He doesn't know if he's going to find him, but there was a park nearby. So they walk through the park, and this Jew is sitting Shabbos morning in the park with a newspaper, and he's smoking a cigar, smoking a cigarette, and reading the paper. So they saw this. They didn't want to go over. They went back to shul, and he tells his father that, unfortunately, we saw him in the park. He's sitting and reading a newspaper, and he's smoking on Shabbos. So his father said, "Sinisht emes, sinisht emes." The Baba V'Rav says, "Sinisht emes." Erechet nisht av Shabbos. So he says, "Tata, you could be Melamed Schus. It's a wonderful thing. I wouldn't invent a story about somebody. It's not my thing. And I was here with him. I'm telling you, this is what I saw." He says, "Sinisht emes." He's not smoking on Shabbos. So he thought, his father was being extra holy and choosing to close his eyes. He says, "Tata, I'm just telling you the fact that he's smoking on Shabbos. Interpret it how you want, but this is the fact." So he says, "Nay, nay, nay. Erechet nisht av Shabbos." He's not being Mechalel Shabbos. The Nazi, the Nazi rechet of Shabbos. The Nazi is Mechalel Shabbos. He's not desecrating Shabbos. The Nazi, the German, is desecrating Shabbos. The German is smoking on Shabbos. He kept on repeating this. He says, you should know this. And you should go back to him, invite him, tell him that we want him here and he's always welcome. And you should know that rechet nicht auf Shabbos, the Nazi rechet. Okay? His father said so he went back. And he invited him and he gave him regards from her father and he said, you're always welcome and so forth. Reb Naftolsha told the story. And he said that approximately 35 or 40 years later, around 35 years later, his father was invited for a Sheva Brachas. And he was already an older man. It was the Baba Verav. Reb Shlomo Halberstam was invited for a Sheva Brachas of a Jew making a wedding. He already wasn't going. It wasn't easy. He was older. But he decided to go. And he went. And the day of the Sheva Brachas, this person, the father of the Chassan, came to the Baba Verav to greet him, to ask for a blessing and so forth. He comes in. So he says, call my son Reb Naftolsha. He calls in his son. And there was a Jew standing there, a Jew with a yarmulke, with payas, with his son, the Chassan, that came for a blessing for the Baba Verav. And he says, du siehst, ich habe dir gesagt, ist nicht Mechalel Shabbos. The Nazi hat Mechalel Shabbos given. Here was that Jew who raised a son according to the path of Torah. He himself was a Shomer Torah mitzvah. So he says, you see, I was right. He was never desecrating the Shabbos. The Nazi was desecrating the Shabbos. Now that takes a penetrating vision to be able to see an act which is terrible, which is wrong, and not to justify it, Khalila, in any way, but to be able to distinguish between the external behavior of the person and who the person really is. This Jew was smoking, but why was he smoking on Shabbos? The pain, the agony, the trauma, the suffering, what he has endured in the war, there was so much pent up in him. This was his way of expressing his frustration, his anger, his pain, his sadness. From his perspective, this is what he felt he should be doing after the Holocaust. It was the Nazi that causes him to desecrate the Shabbos. It's the Nazi desecrating the Shabbos. He himself is not desecrating the Shabbos. However, this defined his life. This overtook his brain. This overtook his heart. There was nothing else. He lost his family. This was it. So who did he blame? He blamed the Jews. He blamed Shabbos. He blamed God. Internally, he wasn't. This is what Rashi is saying, the lesson of Rashi. If it's true in the negative, it's also true in the positive. A person has to be able to know about themselves that their internal purity and holiness, atem, afilu shayigin, afilu mezidin, never ever changes, even if a few years or a few decades, v'etmen fablunjet, there are external factors that take over a person's life, but essentially, who are you? Have a wonderful week. Because malacha, what does it help you? I don't know. That I don't know. It could be al derech haremes. When it comes to Torah, it's lashon hoiva. It says nice in haTorah lashon hoiva. Malacha, right? Mashenkin by malacha, it's nitna. Mizay nois of shaladam ksuvim lam Rosh Hashanah v'ad Yom Kippur. You're right. I understand. I'm just saying. In Yerushalmi, where it's more clear, so the bracha is in the past, Rosh Hashanah. But Torah is chadashim. Every day is a new bracha. It could be, I'm not sure that's shot, but maybe in Yerushalmi, where everything is clear, so Torah is about present and it could be.
It's not a mistake.
Not my mistake. I took it from I googled Yerushalmi. They have Yerushalmi online, and I copied it. I don't know if there's another gears. I didn't check. I just took it from the internet. I didn't do it myself. No, I wouldn't change a word in Yerushalmi.
No,
Could be. I don't know. I don't want to say because I didn't look up all the Yerushalmi. There's sometimes a lot of girses, but I don't know. But it could be. It's an interesting diuk. Bracha nitenes b'teirasa lashon hoiva. Bracha nitna b'malachta lashon hova because it's Rosh Hashanah. But noisin haTorah lashon hoiva. What do you say? Kachadashim.
Find in ourselves what is it we made a cheshbon of this. We don't see where did we go wrong that we want to bring the congregation. So Moshe Rabbeinu looks at them and he says, you were so roy for the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. The Eibishter wanted to be Megalia, the Indian of Pesach Shem.
Through you.
He says, you had no problem.
Faket.
You let me go faket. You was there today.
Make a suffer.
But what I'm saying is,
So Rabbi Gedalia says this in Megillah? Where?
He says this on
Pesach Sheni. Ramosha answers him. Said that was part of the tshuva, from Woman Igara. Because it came, you know what I'm saying?
But I want to bring up with the Tzedek that he had such a different view on this.
The Torah was blemished. I think the lashon is bereicha de levushayu. The Yenuka smelled in the reich of the levushim. I think that's what it says in Zohar. Right? There's a machlekes of Tosfos in the Yerushalmi and Sukkah. Ha'isik b'mitzvah patim and mitzvah. What's pshat, right? If you could do the other mitzvah, are you still patim and mitzvah? So there's two shittas, the Ran, Tosfos. One is that only if you can't do it, but if you could, of course you have to. But another shit, ha'isik b'mitzvah patim and mitzvah. Even if you could do the other mitzvah, you're still patim and mitzvah. Even if you could do the other mitzvah.
Because you can't be 100% in two places. In other words, when you're doing a mitzvah, you have to be 100%
right.
there. There's nothing left from you to do.
Yeah, it's just like the Lomdisha way would be, in other words, what's the gather? Is the gather oisig mitzvah patim and a mitzvah, but he's taka patim and a mitzvah, but it's mufka from him. He's not mechuyev in it, but he doesn't have the other mitzvah. He's not going to be an einish. He's not mechuyev taka, but. Or the pshat is oisig mitzvah patim and a mitzvah means as taka patis afil and taka in chlois chiyuv afil. What would be the nafka min? If you could do the other mitzvah, so it's taka in chlois chiyuv b'chlal, so it's not a mitzvah for you. Yeah. The Rebbe rather writes in Lomdas oisig mitzvah patim and a mitzvah. This is a very beautiful word. He says every mitzvah is really, like Gemara says in Pesachim, mitzvahs ein mevatla zu zu. Benegay matzah and mara is menatoid. It's not a problem. Why not? He says because really the nekud of every mitzvah is a shekadishana b'mitzvahs of itzivano. It's dvekas with Hashem. Hashem is einer. So really every mitzvah is yeda an the mitzvah. Ha'isik b'mitzvah patim mitzvah v'lahata an the mitzvah. He's doing the other mitzvah. It's not pshat. He's patim and a mitzvah. It's one etzem. It's like a hastu. The mitzvah is really one etzem, so it's not like it's indivisible. The hasta on the mitzvah. If you're oisik b'mitzvah, you're not oisik b'mitzvah. Kol mitzvah. A mitzvah. For chedushi harim, huh?
That also might tell you whether if it's possible, whether there would still be a chiyuv to do both or not.
Right. The Ritva, but the Ran argues with Tosfos very heavy.
When you say it's a different
Right.
Even
Right. Right. What up is flag?
That's why every daf starts from that base.
Let's say to Luchas.
No, yes, it's a Svei to Luchas. It's not. Aleph means it's Einzah. Base is already when
it's division. And also the second Luchas. But you mean Beis that is Shnius, duality. Huh? Duality. Negeya b'katzeo.
It goes into prat.
Prat. Klala prat. Yeah.
This is your own. The last week's is your own.
Well, it was based on the Yisrael was based on the Tzafnas Panea. I developed it. Yeah. With him, you have to develop it. There's a very sugar.
Today is yours also?
No, this side from the Lubavitcher.
He
the Ganze Torah. From Ame Business Software.